If you vanished tomorrow, no one would care, my boss said at the staff meeting, smirking as the department heads chuckled. The HR manager even nodded, sipping her coffee as if I were nothing but a mop with a pulse. I stood there in my faded blue uniform, rubber gloves tucked in my belt, my mop bucket still damp from the morning shift. The words hit me harder than the ammonia sting in the air. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard him over the hum of the vending machine, but no, he'd said it clearly, loudly enough for the whole room to hear. If you vanished tomorrow, the place would still run just fine. We'd hire someone new in a week. The conference room erupted in light laughter, the kind you use when someone makes a cruel joke you're too cowardly to call out. I looked around at faces I'd seen every day for years. Carla from HR smirked behind her mug. Tim from security looked down, pretending to check his phone. Even Marcia from accounting, who I'd once helped carry her groceries to her car during a rainstorm, just gave a little shrug, like my existence was a replaceable part in some corporate machine. I'd been here 22 years. I'd cleaned vomit out of the break room sink, scraped gum off the underside of tables, unclogged toilets at 3 a.m. when pipes burst. I'd shoveled snow from the front steps before anyone else arrived, just so they could walk in without slipping. My job was invisible until something went wrong, and then suddenly everyone noticed. Now, apparently, my disappearance wouldn't matter at all. Is that all I am to you people? The question burned in my chest, but I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I put my mop back in the bucket, the wheels squeaking on the linoleum. "Excuse me," I muttered, walking out. Not one person called after me. The door swung shut behind me with a hiss from the building's old hydraulic hinge, and I was back in the quiet hallway, surrounded by beige walls and the faint smell of disinfectant I'd come to know better than my own cologne. The December air outside hit like a slap. Snowflakes clung to my sleeves as I stepped out behind the building. I could still hear muffled voices through the glass, the meeting going on without me. I leaned on my mop handle like a cane, staring at the dumpsters lined up by the loading dock. I'd emptied those bins for years without a single thank you. When had I stopped being a person and become just a moving part of the cleaning crew? The wind tugged at my cap, and the thought came to me as sharp as the chill in my fingers. Maybe I should vanish, not for good, just long enough to let them choke on their own trash. Let the floors stay sticky, the toilets stay clogged, the cafeteria tables crust over with yesterday's spills. Let them see what running just fine really looked like without me. That night I went through my small apartment above the laundromat, pulling out a notebook from the kitchen drawer. The first page I wrote in big block letters, Operation Vanish. I listed every daily task I did at that place, things no one thought about unless they didn't get done. Emptying office trash cans, sweeping loading docks, clearing snow before 7 a.m., restocking toilet paper and soap dispensers, wiping down touchscreens. I knew the rhythm of that building like my own heartbeat. Without me, chaos wouldn't just arrive, it would spread. Step 2 was making sure I could disappear without them tracking me down in a day. I had 2 weeks of unused vacation time. They'd probably just assume I was taking a break. That was fine. The trick was making it long enough that their routines broke down before they could replace me. I opened the second page and wrote, Hideout. There was an old cabin my uncle had left me years ago, way out past Milford Lake, half a mile off the main road. No one at work knew I owned it. It had no internet, no cable, just a wood stove, a bed, and a shelf of old books. Perfect. By the end of the week, I had everything planned. Friday afternoon, after emptying the main floor bins one last time, I rolled my mop bucket into the storage closet, locked it, and left my work keys in a plain white envelope addressed to management. On top, I taped a sticky note, Gone to find out if I matter, don't wait up. Saturday morning, I was already on the road before sunrise, my old pickup rattling down the highway. I'd left my phone on the kitchen table in my apartment. In my pocket was a prepaid flip phone I'd bought with cash at a gas station 3 towns over. Nobody had the number. It was mine alone, my lifeline only if I wanted it. The cabin was exactly as I remembered it, musty, cold, and quiet except for the wind moving through the trees. I unpacked my bag, lit the wood stove, and sat in the only chair by the small window. From here, I couldn't see the city, but I could imagine it. Monday morning arriving like it always did, coffee brewing in the break room, office chairs squeaking, keyboards clattering, and someone noticing the first overflowing trash can, the first sticky spot on the tile, the bathroom with no paper towels. By Tuesday, I imagined they'd be emailing each other about temporary cleaning coverage. Maybe Tim from security would have to haul bags out to the dumpster himself. By Thursday, the cafeteria would smell faintly sour. Friday, someone would complain to HR about the state of the restrooms. And the following week, that's when the real fun would begin. The first few days in the cabin, I didn't check the flip phone at all. I split firewood, cooked on the old propane stove, read books I hadn't touched in years. It was the first time in 2 decades I'd gone 3 days without smelling bleach. I slept better than I had in months. On the 4th day, curiosity got the better of me. I drove into Milford, bought a coffee, and used the library's computer to check the company's public announcements page. The first post was from HR. Please be advised, our janitorial department is experiencing temporary staffing shortages. We appreciate your patience. 2 days later, employees are asked to tidy up after themselves as we work to resolve ongoing maintenance delays. I smiled into my coffee. Delays. That was their polite way of saying the place was falling apart. Then I found the staff forum, a semi-private page I still had the login for. The threads were gold. Anyone else notice the bathrooms are disgusting? One post read. There's a dead mouse in the break room trap and no one's cleaned it up, another said. Someone else chimed in. The women's restroom has been out of soap for 3 days. This is a health hazard. The replies piled up, frustration growing like mold. Exactly as planned. I leaned back in my chair at the library, picturing my boss trying to run his precious staff meetings while the room smelled faintly of last week's trash, wondering if Carla from HR was now the one hauling bags to the dumpster in her heels. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. But this was just the beginning. They hadn't even seen the rats yet. By the second week, the staff forum was a war zone. Complaints weren't just about trash or soap anymore. They were about smell. Why does the lobby smell like a subway station? One person posted. Another replied, because no one's mopped the entryway in days. People are tracking in snow, salt, and God knows what else. Someone attached a blurry photo of a gray slush puddle spreading across the tile, grit and cigarette butts floating in it. The caption, still here after 3 days. That was when I decided it was time to step things up. Before I'd left, I'd done more than just walk out. I'd left behind small time bombs in the building, garbage bags sealed tight and tucked in places people rarely looked. Behind the vending machine on the 2nd floor, in the janitor's closet by the loading dock, under the utility sink in the copy room. It wouldn't take long for those to rip or leak, and by the posts I was reading, at least one had. The smell near the copy room is unbearable, someone wrote. It's like something died in there. A few employees joked about haunting, but most were furious. On Thursday, I drove into the city, parked 2 blocks from the building, and took a walk around the perimeter just before closing time. From the sidewalk, I could see Tim from security struggling with 2 overstuffed trash bags, his face red, his uniform jacket pulled tight against the wind. He dumped them into the dumpster, muttering to himself. The loading dock door was propped open, and I caught a whiff of what was probably the copy room bag. Even from here, it was bad. I ducked into a coffee shop across the street and took a seat by the window. My boss exited not long after, pulling his scarf up over his mouth as if to block the smell. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the image. The man who'd said my absence wouldn't matter now looked like someone living next to a landfill. By Friday, the staff forum was filled with photos. A bathroom stall with no toilet paper, the cafeteria floor sticky enough to leave shoe prints, a clogged sink in the men's room with brown water swirling lazily. HR posted a plea. Please remember to clean up after yourselves and report major issues to management immediately. We are still in the process of securing replacement staff. Translation: no one wanted the job. The agency probably sent temps, but they wouldn't last a day. I knew how that building worked. Half the cleaning jobs required knowing exactly which doors jammed, which light switches controlled what, and which pipes needed to be bobbied. Outsiders wouldn't survive the first shift. The next Monday, I checked the local classifieds. Sure enough, there it was, urgently hiring janitorial staff, immediate start, night shifts, competitive pay. I almost laughed out loud. Competitive pay. They offered me a 10-cent raise after 5 years, and now they were dangling competitive ease to strangers who'd probably bolt after the first trash spill. That afternoon, I drove to a public library branch in a different neighborhood to log into the staff forum again. One thread had blown up overnight. The subject line, "We have rats." Someone had posted a grainy photo of a rat darting under the snack machine, its tail a pale streak against the tile. Replies came in fast, stories of seeing them in the cafeteria, near the loading dock, even in the HR office. I knew exactly where they'd come from. Weeks ago, during my last late-night rounds, I'd seen signs of them near the dumpster and decided not to call pest control. Without someone to empty trash daily, the building was a buffet. They'd moved in faster than I'd expected. In the comments, Carla from HR finally cracked. "This is unacceptable. Management needs to fix this immediately." Someone replied, "Tell that to your boss." Oh, wait. Another posted a laughing emoji. The tension was turning into open mutiny. Midweek, I swung by the cabin's wood stove after a grocery run, flipped open my flip phone, and saw 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Probably management finally digging through emergency contacts. I ignored it. If they wanted me back, they could stew in their mess a little longer. By Friday, they'd escalated. The staff forum had an all-caps post, "Mandatory staff clean UP day this Saturday." Every employee was required to show up, gloves and masks provided to help clean the building. The replies were pure outrage. "This isn't in my job description. I'm not scrubbing toilets, that's why we hire janitors. Half the people will call in sick." I leaned back in my chair at the library, imagining my boss handing out mops to department heads, forcing them to scrub floors they'd once walked over without thinking. Saturday evening, I returned to the city and parked near the back lot. Through the loading dock door, I could see them. A dozen employees in disposable gloves, scooping trash into bags, gagging at the smell. My boss stood there with a clipboard, sweat soaking his collar, his scarf now tied around his face like a bandit. I watched as a woman from marketing recoiled from a rat scurrying across the floor, her scream echoing into the cold night. Tim from security stomped after it with a broom, missing twice before it vanished into the shadows. I stayed just long enough to see my boss drop his clipboard, mutter something, and walk outside to take deep breaths in the freezing air. His face was pale, his shoulders slumped. I knew then that the cracks weren't just in the building, they were in him. My absence wasn't just inconvenient anymore, it was breaking him. That night back at the cabin, I lit the wood stove and opened my notebook to a fresh page. Phase 3. Up until now, the lesson had been about inconvenience and discomfort. But if I really wanted them to understand what I did for them every day, it was time to show them the cost, not in sweat or stink, but in cold, hard numbers. If they thought janitors were disposable, I'd let them see exactly what replacing me would take. Monday morning, I drove into Milford, bought a black coffee, and settled into a corner computer at the library. I pulled up the company's publicly posted budget reports, nothing too detailed, but enough to see line items for facilities maintenance and special sanitation services. Then I cross-referenced job postings for janitorial contractors in the area. It didn't take long to build a picture, what they'd been paying me versus what they were paying now. The math was brutal. My salary had been barely above minimum wage, but the emergency contractors, triple my rate plus surcharges for hazardous cleanup because of the rat infestation. They were bleeding money. I started drafting a packet, a neat, professional-looking document that compared the costs of regular janitor, Me, with current emergency response teams. I highlighted totals in bold, added charts showing the spike in expenses since my disappearance, and even included screenshots from the staff forum with people complaining about health hazards and rodent sightings. At the top, I wrote in block letters, "This is what happens when you think a janitor matter." I printed 5 copies. The next morning, I put on a gray hoodie, ball cap pulled low, and walked past the building just before 7 a.m., slipping one packet into the outside mailbox and the others under the windshield wipers of the management's cars in the lot. Then I strolled to the cafe across the street to watch. Sure enough, at 8:15, my boss came out in his long coat, spotted the packet on his windshield, and froze. He yanked it off, flipped through the pages, and stopped walking entirely. I couldn't see his expression from here, but his grip on the paper tightened until his knuckles went white. Carla from HR came out 10 minutes later, holding her copy like it was radioactive. She glanced around the lot, proba. Bly wondering who'd done it. By noon, the staff forum had exploded. Someone had leaked the packet inside. "Is this real? Are we really spending $12K a week on cleanup now?" one employee asked. "Could have kept our old guy for a fraction of that," another replied. My favorite comment was from Tim. "I told management we needed him. No one listened. I wondered if my boss saw that." Midweek, the tone on the forum had shifted. Before, complaints were aimed at the situation, trash, rats, smell. Now people were calling out management directly. If we'd treated him better, maybe he'd still be here. Remember when the boss said he could vanish and no one would care? That one had 36 laughing emojis, but they weren't laughing at me this time. The ridicule had turned on him. Thursday night, I drove back to the cabin with groceries and a bottle of cheap whiskey. I sat at the table, sipping, reading the forum threads over and over. They'd gone from mocking me to missing me, from ignoring my work to acknowledging it in blunt, humbling terms. But the boss hadn't cracked yet. He hadn't reached out personally. And until he did, the lesson wasn't finished. On Saturday, a new post went up, an internal memo from the company's leadership. Due to continued sanitation challenges and increased costs, all non-essential budgets are frozen until further notice. Translation: no Christmas bonuses. The replies were furious. "We're paying for management's pride," someone wrote. All this because they couldn't admit they needed one guy. A few employees tagged my old staff forum account, which had been inactive for weeks. "If you're out there reading this, we're sorry," one message said. "Please come back." Sunday morning, I decided to push them one step closer to breaking. I drove into the city, parked 2 blocks away, and waited until dusk. Then, wearing gloves, I walked around to the back of the building and taped a fresh note to the loading dock door, right where the boss would see it when he left. It read, "You said if I vanished, no one would care. How's that working out for you?" No signature, no clue it was me, just the words. The next day on the forum, someone posted a blurry cell phone photo of the note. The thread blew up instantly. "Whoever left this, thank you," one wrote. Another guessed it was some ex-employee getting revenge, and a third flatly stated, "It's him, has to be." The boss posted nothing. No denial, no acknowledgement. But from then on, I noticed he started parking on the opposite side of the building. That week, I made my first in-person appearance since vanishing. I waited until the lunch rush at the cafe across the street, when I knew the place would be packed with my former coworkers. I walked in wearing an oversized coat, dark glasses, and a beanie pulled low. I ordered a sandwich, sat in the corner, and just watched. People came in, shaking snow off their coats, grumbling about the smell back in the cafeteria, or how the contractors don't even sweep under the tables. 2 of them from accounting sat nearby talking about how the budget freeze was killing morale. All because management couldn't admit they were wrong, one said. I smiled into my coffee. But then one of them added, "You know, if he came back now, I'd thank him every day." The other nodded. "Same, we never realized how much he did until it was gone." It hit me harder than I expected. I'd wanted them to regret my absence, yes, but hearing that kind of open respect, unscripted, unforced, made something in my chest loosen. The lesson was working. Still, I told myself it wasn't quite enough. The boss hadn't learned yet. Until he admitted what he'd done, I wasn't ready to walk back in. The game wasn't over. The first week of February brought a blizzard. I knew exactly what that would mean for the building. Snowdrifts piling up against the front entrance, ice slicking over the loading dock, slush tracked through every hallway. Normally, I'd have been out there before sunrise, salting steps, clearing walkways, laying down mats to keep the floors safe. Now, from the comfort of the cabin, I imagined employees trying to tiptoe over black ice in dress shoes, juggling coffee cups, cursing under their breath when they slipped. I checked the staff forum that evening and wasn't disappointed. "Almost broke my neck on the front steps this morning," one thread began. "No salt, no shoveling. Does anyone in this building care?" Another reply. "Someone from marketing fell in the parking lot. Ambulance had to come." By the next day, there was a post from HR. "Reminder to watch your step during inclement weather. Maintenance is working to address the situation." The replies were ruthless. "Define working. You mean waiting for the sun to do it?" That week, the complaints took on a sharper edge. It wasn't just about discomfort anymore. It was about safety, liability. Even the contractors they'd hired refused to do snow and ice R. Removal, it wasn't in their job scope. Every winter hazard I used to handle quietly was now on full display, and people were scared. A few staffers started hinting online that the boss's stubbornness could cost someone their job, or worse. I decided it was time for Phase 4, force the boss into a corner. At the library, I typed up a formal letter addressed to the company's board of directors. It was anonymous, of course, but written like it came from a concerned employee. It detailed the sanitation issues, the infestation, the skyrocketing maintenance costs, and now the unsafe conditions from the snow and ice. I attached photos from the staff forum and a chart showing how much productivity had likely been lost since my disappearance. My final paragraph was the hook. "One person's pride is costing this company tens of thousands of dollars and putting lives at risk, all because he couldn't admit he was wrong about a janitor." I mailed it to every board member I could find a public address for, slipping the envelopes into an outgoing bin at a post office 2 towns over. Then I sat back in the cabin and waited. It didn't take long. A week later, the forum was buzzing with rumors about a closed-door emergency meeting between the board and management. By Friday, a memo went out. Due to ongoing operational challenges, leadership is exploring new strategies to restore workplace safety and cleanliness. That bland corporate language didn't fool anyone. The comments were blunt. Translation: bring him back. Bet the boss is sweating now. Saturday afternoon, I made another quiet trip into the city. I parked behind the building where I could see the boss's office window. The blinds were open and he was pacing. A stack of papers sat on his desk, looked a lot like the packet I delivered weeks ago. He stopped pacing, rubbed his face, and stared out the window toward the loading dock. For a second, I thought he might actually see me, but his eyes didn't focus. He just looked tired, not the swaggering man from the staff meeting. Not the one who'd smirked and said I wouldn't be missed. I should have felt victorious. Instead, there was this strange heaviness in my gut. Watching him slump in his chair, head in his hands, I realized the fight was draining him in ways I hadn't predicted. Part of me wanted to walk in right then and end it, but I stayed put. There was one more piece I needed to see before deciding. That night back at the cabin, I logged into the forum again. A new thread had appeared, started by Carla from HR, of all people. "I want to publicly say I was wrong. We all were. We treated our janitor like he didn't matter, and now we're all paying the price. If you're reading this, I'm sorry." The replies came fast. "Same here. We miss you. Come back, please." Even Tim from security chimed in. "I'll buy you coffee every morning if you return." I stared at the screen for a long time. I'd never imagined Carla admitting fault in writing. The tide had turned completely. The staff had learned. They'd suffered the consequences. They were ready to own their part in it. Now the only holdout was the boss. 2 days later, I got my moment. On Tuesday morning, a photo hit the forum, a candid shot of my boss in the break room, talking to a small group of employees. The caption, "He says he wants to apologize if he ever sees him again." My breath caught. That was as close to a public confession as he was going to get, and maybe that was enough. I closed the laptop and looked around the cabin, the stove, the books, the worn chair by the window. This place had been my war room, my fortress. But now it felt smaller, like its purpose had been served. I thought about the building across town, the one I knew better than anyone. I thought about the people inside it, their faces when they'd see me walk through the door. Some would cheer, some would cry, and one man would have to shake my hand and admit, without words, that he'd been wrong. I went to bed that night with my bag half-packed, the flip phone on the table, its battery full for the first time in weeks. The storm had passed. All that was left was to decide if I wanted to walk back into the mess I'd left, or let it keep rotting without me. The decision came at dawn. I woke to the sound of wind moving through the pines outside the cabin, the same sound I'd heard every morning for weeks, but today it felt different, like the end of something. I brewed a cup of coffee on the propane stove, stood at the window, and pictured the building's hallways in my mind, the scuffed linoleum, the creak of the mop bucket wheels, the way the smell of disinfectant meant everything was under control. I missed it, not the work itself, but what it meant. It was mine. And they finally knew it. By 8, my bag was zipped, the wood stove's fire banked low, the cabin door locked. I drove back toward the city, snow still crusting the edges of the roads, when the skyline came into view. My hands tightened on the wheel. 3 months of silence, 3 months of watching them struggle, 3 months since my boss told me I could vanish and no one would care. Time to find out if he still believed that. I didn't go straight to the building. First, I parked across the street in the cafe where I'd done most of my watching. The morning rush was in full swing, employees streaming in, stamping snow off their boots, ordering coffee before trudging to work. A few I recognized glanced my way but didn't seem to register who I was under the dark coat and knit cap. I waited until the crowd thinned, then stood, finished my coffee, and walked toward the place that had been my second home for 2 decades. Inside, the lobby was a mess, mud tracked in, a scattering of salt pellets on the tile, the faint smell of garbage lingering in the air. The potted plant in the corner was dying. My mop closet door was ajar, the shelves in disarray. Whoever had been trying to keep up had no idea what they were doing. I stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind me, and let the familiar scent of industrial cleaner fill my lungs. Then I rolled the mop bucket out into the hall. The squeak of its wheels drew heads from doorways. First, it was Tim from security. He froze mid-step, eyes wide, then grinned. "No way you're back." Before I could answer, Carla from HR appeared, her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. "I didn't think you'd ever," she broke off, shaking her head. "I'm so sorry for what I said before. We all are." I nodded, kept moving. I wasn't here for apologies from them, not yet. The break room was full, people mid-conversation, coffee cups in hand. My boss was at the counter, stirring sugar into his mug. When he saw me, he stopped cold. The spoon clinked against the ceramic. The room went quiet. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. I saw it all in his face, surprise, relief, a flicker of pride swallowed by shame. He set the mug down and crossed the room slowly. "I was wrong," he said quietly. No smirk, no crowd-pleasing tone, just the flat truth. "You mattered more than I ever admitted. We all see it now." It wasn't dramatic, no grand speech, no sudden hug, just those words, and they were enough. I held his gaze for a second longer, then gave a single nod. "Let's get to work," I said. The rest of the morning was a blur of motion. I started in the lobby, laying down mats, sweeping grit into the dustpan, scraping dried salt from the tile. People stopped to thank me, to shake my hand, to say they'd missed me. Even the contractors still hanging around looked relieved to see someone who knew the building's quirks. Word traveled fast. By lunch, it felt like every floor knew I was back. In the afternoon, I found myself alone in the cafeteria. The floor was sticky, the trash cans full. I leaned on my mop handle for a moment, looking out the window at the gray sky. 3 months ago, I'd left to prove a point, and I had, not just to them, but to myself. I wasn't invisible. My work mattered, I mattered, and now they'd never forget it. As I pushed the mop across the tile, I heard footsteps behind me. It was my boss again, holding two steaming paper cups. He set one on the counter beside me. "Coffee," he said, "black like you take it." I took the cup, the heat seeping into my fingers. "Thanks." "I know it doesn't erase what I said," he added, shifting awkwardly. "But I want you to know, I'll never say anything like that again. Not to you, not to anyone." I met his eyes, searching for any hint of the man who dismissed me so easily before. He wasn't there. What I saw instead was someone who'd been humbled, someone who'd learned. I gave a short nod. "Good, because now you know what happens when the janitor vanishes." That night, after the last trash bag was tied and the floors gleamed under the flickering fluorescent lights, I wheeled the mop bucket back into the closet. The building was quiet, almost peaceful. I closed the door, took a sip of the now cool coffee, and smiled to myself. The revenge had been satisfying, but the respect, that was worth more. If you enjoyed this story of quiet revenge and hard-earned respect, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more powerful tales, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps bring more stories to life. Don't miss the next one.